Welcome to the Living Medicine podcast, where we talk about ethical medical use of psychedelic psychotherapy, teaching skills, examining the issues, and interviewing interesting people. Now let's start today's show.
Great. Hello, everyone. Well, I am both a little bit nervous, deeply honored, and super excited to be able to be here with Dr. Rick Doblin. Just also, I'm from the Living Medicine Institute. I'm so nervous that I forgot my introduction. As I'm sure you all know, I am the co-founder and the CEO of Living Medicine Institute, which is a business where we provide content, resources, and training for clinical and medical professionals who are interested in either learning about psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, getting training to move into psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, or launch a career or stay current within that field. And for me, this particular moment is really exciting because I have been following Rick for many, many years, including way back to Burning Man back in the day, but really been tracking this research since the early 90s. I know that you started in the 80s, but have really actually been following it pretty closely since that time. And as I've said before in other interviews, I'm very mission driven. Like I'm one of those people who in 1994 was like, I will do this work. I will stand with you in this work kind of thing. I even remember when I made that pronouncement. So it's really an honor. And as I'm sure everybody knows, but Rick is the founder and president of MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And for those of you who may be less familiar, that is the organization that has just created the bus, got everybody on the bus, and then drove the bus through all the obstacles and continues to do so in order to push forward the agenda, not just on MDMA, but on psychedelic medicine in general. And so,
I'll say we're driving the bus to Denver.
Yes.
June 16th to the 20th.
Awesome.
And this is going to be one of the largest conferences on psychedelics ever in the world. We've got the convention center. We had 1,500 requests to speak for around 400 spots.
That's amazing.
So go to psychedelicscience.org.
Right.
Learn about
right. And we are going to have a booth there. So, if anybody can find us in the exhibit hall, so we'll be there. So it's psychedelicscience.org, and we should all be there. So I'm glad that you put that right there. If you want to stay cutting edge in this field, then that's the place to be. So, and I know you as somebody, as I said, who's just really changed my life. I've had the honor of having some other people on here who've really changed my life, but were it not for you, well, that sounds stupid. Were it not for you, I wouldn't be sitting here, obviously, but I wouldn't be in this. I wouldn't have the opportunity to do this work. So I'm really grateful. So thank you for that.
That's the best reward for me, is to see other people taking it up and doing their part as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's this movement, right? It's not just should we or shouldn't we make psychedelics, legal for therapeutic use, which is ultimately what we're going to move into talking about. But it's really, it is a revolution in the way that we see mental health and how we see change. So, yeah. Well, so I'm curious, as I'm sure everybody is, what's your current focus? Right. There's been a lot of changes, right? That in August, we all thought that MDMA was going to be approved. It wasn't. There's been a bunch of different changes with MAPS and Lykos and all kinds of stuff still going on with the FDA and this conference coming up. And, where are you at these days? What is Rick Doblin up to, and what's the focus currently?
Well, we brought in some new investors to Lykos. So part of this is trying to reconfigure what Lykos will do and what their priorities will be, and try to go about obtaining FDA approval.
Okay.
So that's a big part, but mostly I'm just sort of on the sidelines for that with the new investors and the new management, but trying to make sure that public benefit and MAPS interests are still important priorities. Got big meetings with lawyers tomorrow. But what I'm assuming, and I think it's correct, is that MDMA will eventually be made into a medicine approved by the FDA.
Yeah.
Whether that's sooner or later, we can't really say. So what I'm doing with most of my time is looking around the world in terms of sort of global humanitarian projects. So I would sort of say that what we want to do is go to where the suffering is, but where there's not a lot of money, high trauma, low resource areas.
Yeah.
Whereas the pharma company with investors will probably go to high trauma, high resource areas. So what's happening in just a few weeks is I'm heading off to Ukraine. So
Oh,
we are training Ukrainian therapists.
uh-huh.
And Ukraine has been stuck for years now with terrible laws from Russia left over, being a very repressive conservative society, that you cannot do research with Schedule 1 drugs.
Oh,
Even if they're been research in other places, you can only do research in Ukraine with medicines that are approved somewhere else.
yeah. Oh,
So
interesting.
it's been really a big struggle, but the Ukrainian government is now willing to change that. So they
Oh,
put
interesting.
some
That's a huge thing.
legislation. So we're going to be training the first training of 50 or 55 Ukrainian therapists in MDMA assisted therapy. And then once that's done, there's a good chance that we'll be able to actually get permission for a project. And then we'd be fundraising for philanthropy to try to fund that going forward. I just had some incredible meetings with people from Rwanda.
Really?
We
Wow.
are thinking about Rwanda. We have a project in Somaliland, of all places.
Uh-huh.
And we've
Huh.
already sent MDMA down there from Canada for the training of therapists. We've got plans. Basically, MAPS is doing these international therapist training programs,
Yeah.
like the ones in Sarajevo that we've had.
Yes. Where I was there last summer.
Yeah, and so we're going to do one in Poland in October, and Switzerland, I think, is in January. And so what I'm trying to do is do 4 or 5 different small pilot studies.
Yeah.
That goes beyond the training into actually working in different countries, different cultural contexts, and to see how MDMA assisted therapy can be delivered, and also to see who are sort of the local therapists. Like in Rwanda, there's not any therapists or psychiatrists.
Right.
So how to bring MDMA there? So that's kind of my bigger focus, is working internationally in that way. The goal is in a couple of years, let's say 3 years, hopefully to get like $100 million grant to
Nice.
expand it in major ways over the coming years.
Yeah.
We're also MAPS has some really interesting stuff that we're doing in the U.S. We just started a project that we helped raise the funds for at Columbia University, and it's interviewing underground MDMA therapists about couples therapy with MDMA.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So the FDA has never made a drug into a medicine in psychiatry for something that isn't in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Right.
However, from what we've understood, there's nothing in the law that would prevent the FDA from doing that. So therapy is not a traditional diagnosis, but I believe it will prove to be one of the best uses of MDMA.
Yeah.
So we're going to be doing this interview study, and then move to actually design a clinical trial.
So is that the purpose of that, to kind of get by, I mean, because what I witnessed is that it's almost like the FDA just simply did not address psychotherapy outcome research methodology because we're not psychotherapy people, we're drug people. And that was kind of what I witnessed is that was sort of a reason to just dismiss that and throw that to the side, even though that whole literature exists, and is well validated and people have spent their careers looking at that. I mean, is that kind of like an effort to sort of get past that, like FDA only does drugs kind of piece?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. The FDA works on devices, and so there are both devices, and then there's instructions for how do you install devices, like knee replacements, things like that. So the FDA doesn't really regulate the instructions to the surgeons; they regulate the device. So in this case, the MDMA is like a device. The is like the instructions. So the FDA doesn't regulate the content of therapy, but they are fully aware that MDMA is not the treatment in and of itself, that the treatment is a therapeutic context within which MDMA is administered. So I think what really happened is that we had the misfortune, I would say, of having more traditional pharmaceutical people running the pharma company who
Yeah.
didn't really want to be associated with the therapy because all they knew was the drug.
Yeah.
So when we would have criticisms of our therapeutic method, particularly if there was one in March 2023 in JAMA Psychiatry,
Mm.
was not responded to. Lycos didn't want to respond.
No.
Not only that, but they blocked me and MAPS from responding.
Mm.
And so they had through the MAPS board and the Lycos board and just dynamics like that. So I think there's a misunderstanding, or at least these criticisms of the therapeutic method were not really addressed by Lycos. And so
Yeah.
it created this confusion of, whether our data was reliable or not.
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think this idea that this further negotiations will take place with the FDA, it's to really address this question of, is our data reliable?
Mm-hmm.
The other part about this psychotherapy, the aspects of it, is that the FDA doesn't regulate the practice of medicine. So what that means is once a drug is made into a medicine by the FDA, doctors can prescribe it off label, means for something else other than
Mm-hmm.
So similarly, once a therapy is used in combination with a drug to demonstrate safety and efficacy, once the FDA gives its approval, they don't regulate the kind of therapy that will take place.
Okay.
Therapists can modify it. But what I think the FDA can and likely will regulate is say somebody with these credentials needs to be in the room for these many hours.
Yeah.
You
Which
know,
makes sense to me,
or
right? I mean, it's not a
yeah,
perfect solution, but that does make sense.
yeah. And I'm not, I wish that they would say something like, all the therapists that want to be working with this need to have a minimum amount of specialized training.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to happen. So I think
Mhm.
that when you just imagine a lot of like cognitive behavioral therapy,
Right.
that's people that have delivered cognitive behavioral therapy um, can sometimes really help patients quite a bit. But
Mm.
it's kind of a formula almost of how you work with people, and it's very different than this emotional flow that comes up this when you do a psychedelic. So
Totally.
a lot of what we're trying to do is actually untrain therapists,
Oh, interesting.
and open them up to this different approach so that a good way to say it, I think, is that when you take a psychedelic, it's like dreaming, but you can't wake up.
Right.
So when you have these dreams that are scary, nightmares, whatever, or even somehow you're about to die in a dream or stuff, people wake up. But with psychedelics, you can't wake up, you have to work through it.
Yeah.
I think that's the essence of this therapeutic approach, is that we support people as they work through things, but we're not actually um, like in a cognitive behavioral or in prolonged exposure,
Yeah.
where you work on your quote index trauma, the worst trauma that you've ever had, and you go over and over and over that to try to desensitize yourself to it. We don't do anything like that. We support what's emerging. So Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the book The Body Keeps the Score,
Yeah.
was our principal investigator of the Boston site.
Uh-huh.
So things, emotions, memories, traumas often come in terms of pain in the body. Sometimes, that they're it takes a while for people to be able to address them directly. That's the whole thing about post-traumatic stress disorder, that it never seems to go away. It always feels overwhelming, the memories of the trauma. It's always about to happen or seems to be happening, this kind of sense. And so what we do is when people are under the influence of MDMA or other substances, other psychedelics, there's a flow.
Mm.
We've kind of spoken about it as the inner healing intelligence.
Right.
So the concept is really, we all know that happens with our body, that it
Mhm.
sort of tries to restore order, and you get a cut, it heals. So that's this theory behind this idea that when you take a psychedelic and stuff comes, we're not the guide. We don't use the word guide. We support
Mhm.
what's emerging, whether it comes in a pain in the body or it comes in a memory or it comes in just a pure emotion without link to a story. whatever that happens to be, we encourage its expression. Dan Grof has this really great expression or saying that the full experience of an emotion is the funeral pyre of that emotion.
I love that.
Yeah, that once you can fully grieve, then things move on, or you can fully feel stuck and you accept that, then that becomes a part rather than the whole.
Well, and I see that, I know ketamine is not the same, but it is a legal psychedelic, and I do trauma work with it, and I do it a lot. Like I do multiple sessions a week, and for somebody to kind of run the full arc of that experience while also having that capacity to be both in it and then to witness it, and then to have that happen in the construct, in the container of an attuned relationship with somebody who is just with you is fundamentally different, than going in and like reliving and retalking and reliving and retalking and like driving towards that index trauma. I mean, I live that too. Like there can be a time and a place for that if it naturally emerges, but do we really need to make people go there? And is there benefit in doing so? And I can see why critics who are unfamiliar with that type of approach would just kind of leverage that as like, they're not doing anything, they're not doing anything, they're not doing anything.
Yeah, well, of the 8-hour MDMA session, around, and it's different for everybody, but people have eye shades on, they are listening to music in headphones. Around half the time, people are focused inner, and the therapists are like meditating quietly but paying attention to the person. They're there. It's not that they're doing nothing. They're actually really creating this safe, supportive context and encouraging people to explore whatever is happening. The other, more or less half the time, in no particular order, they're talking with the therapist.
Right.
So there is this tendency of therapists to think unless they're doing something, they're doing nothing.
Right.
And so one of the things that Michael Mithofer has taught is called wait. And what that means is, why am I talking?
Why am I talking? Totally.
And this also relates to one of the other more, on the one hand, obvious, but the other controversial aspects of the training of therapists is for them to try the drug that they're giving to their patients.
Right.
And we've had 2 FDA-approved protocols for that, and the people that have been through that have really learned an enormous amount from that. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So this idea, though, that that should always be optional, never be required. But once you've done that, you know how much is going on when people are not saying anything.
Right. Well, and it's so important. Like we do that in our training program. Like in our level 1, we have people actually do 7 ketamine sessions at different routes of administration. And sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, how can you make people do that? I'm like, well, that would be why they would choose our program. That's different than requiring them to utilize that. But, for people who are paying attention, also, again, the therapeutic use of a medicine experience and one that's outside of a clinical setting, I hate to say recreational because it can be with a great deal of intention, but it is not the same as being like guided and supported with preparation and having somebody be right with you in an intentional fashion. Like I believe people do need to experience that in order to really understand the power of the medicine, the arc, the experience, the attunement, the felt sense of being with another.
Yeah, I think that the only challenge why it makes it controversial is that when you learn prolonged exposure or you learn cognitive behavior therapy, you practice it.
Right.
But with MDMA, because it's a controlled substance, that can only happen legally inside a protocol.
Right.
And then we have to justify getting the protocol approved and all of that. And then it's expensive. But otherwise, it's not controversial. I mean, Freud had it where if you wanted to be an analyst, you had to go through your own analysis.
Totally.
I've never heard of an ayahuasca shaman that's never done ayahuasca.
Right.
So this has become, though, one of the more controversial aspects of training therapists is talking about their own self-experience.
Right. Well, and also a block. Like, it's like, okay, if we're going to, entertain the possibility that coming right out and saying that's important, then how do they get that when we have this legal block? And then does that become the gatekeeper? And how to work with that?
Yeah, I think the other thing to say is that everything is like the bell curves. There are some, if you look at the bell curve of therapists that have never done MDMA, the bell curve of the therapists that have done MDMA, they overlap.
Yeah.
And so there can be some therapists who've never done MDMA that are better than some therapists who have done MDMA.
Right.
But each therapist would be more effective themselves if they'd had that experience. So that's what we believe. And so and it is possible for a good therapist to get good results having never taken it themselves, especially if they've been through the initial 6-day therapist training program that we have, which is what's our treatment manual, what's our adherence criteria, what are the interactions that happen between patients and therapists, how to do this, watching videotapes of therapy sessions, doing role play, things like that. Once you've got that, this just reminds me of a funny story, is that we have over 100 people who have gone through the protocol to receive MDMA.
That's a lot. That's more than I thought. That's great. We have somebody on our team who's done it, who's prepared. He's a supervisor. His name is Dave McDonald. Shout out to Dave.
Yeah, we've had over 100, and we've had something happen only 2 times. And both of these times were psychiatrists who'd never done MDMA before. And the protocol was 4 days long. So the first day, you either get MDMA or a placebo. The second is the day of integration. The third day is what's called the crossover. Whatever you didn't get the first day, you get the third day. And then the fourth day is the day of integration.
Nice.
And this usually takes place after people have been through the 6-day training.
Yeah.
So what we had was this one, this happened with Michael and Annie, one of our lead therapists, training couples, and also Bruce and Marcella. So one of these happened to each one of them, our most experienced therapists and trainers. But what happened was that these were psychiatrists that had never done MDMA, and they were really eager to get it. And they both felt really, really lucky that they got it on their first high, that the day was this MDMA. And they go through these 8-hour sessions. They have pupil dilation. They have various different things that are associated, the physiological aspects of it. They work on difficult traumas that they've had from childhood and others. And they're convinced that it's MDMA. The therapists are convinced.
Oh, interesting.
You can see where it's going. The second day is a day of integration, and they make further progress. And now they're waiting for the third day, where it's going to be a placebo and it's going to be an easy day. And one of them, when he actually realized after about an hour of taking the pill that it wasn't the placebo, it was the MDMA. He couldn't talk for hours.
Yeah.
He was stunned.
Yeah.
And then he would go like this, pointing at the books on the bookshelf, and then pointing at this, like it's in here. It's the feeling. It's not this intellectual knowledge. But this has rarely happened, but it has happened that our most trained therapists are fooled into thinking that somebody got MDMA when they only got the placebo.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all, because when I sat there, I mean, I've been doing psychotherapy for years, and I was also trained as a researcher, and it was psychotherapy outcome research specifically, like how you evaluate. I did adventure therapy work before this, which doesn't sound similar, but is, because it's an experiential process in an emerging field with a perception of risk, and it's multidisciplinary. So, and it draws from multiple theoretic perspectives. So Bruce and Marcel were my trainers, amazing. And I saw the body keeps a score. I mean, I saw Bessel van der Kolk's whole career like unfold in front of me. Like, you can do somatics. You have to do somatics. You have to bring the body in. Doesn't matter if you actually get to the trauma. It's all about the relationship. It's about feeling safe in your body, feeling safe in the environment, feeling safe with the therapist. And then I saw this whole overlay of Hakomi and psychodynamic psychotherapy with relational emphasis. Like, I saw it. And so when people say like, oh, well, it doesn't follow evidence-based practice, and just like as if that in and of itself means therefore you should just throw it out, I'm just like, hold on. This is the most well thought out model I've ever witnessed for trauma. It draws on all of the emerging evidence in the past decade, and it follows extremely rigid and well thought out psychotherapy outcome research principles for an emerging psychotherapy modality. Like, I was like, of course this will get approved, because it's all that. And so for me, just to be like, what, are you kidding me? Like, how can you say this isn't the most effective therapy model that could be put together?
Well, and the data shows it. So that
Exactly.
just to give you an example, or for the people that are listening, our second phase 3 study, moderate to severe PTSD.
Yeah.
The people that got therapy with no MDMA at all, inactive placebo, 47.6% no longer had PTSD.
Right. I mean, how can they just say, like, therefore, this is not actual therapy? Like that just doesn't make
And
sense at all.
And the dropout rate was lower, way lower than other things. There's like half the people drop out of prolonged exposure and cognitive processing therapy. The VA did a study, took them 6 years or so, 914 veterans, comparing cognitive processing therapy with prolonged exposure. And roughly half the people dropped out of the study because it was so re-traumatizing.
Right.
Now, the other part is that we've been doing this since 2000. So we have evidence to talk about whether it's evidence-based or not. We've been doing in controlled clinical studies for over 25 years. And the problem, or I'd say the challenge, is that what makes something evidence-based is that it's adopted by the field.
Yeah.
There are people actually using it, and then see how it works in, quote, real world settings, not just in research. But when you can do this with non-drug therapies, you don't have to get anybody's permission to do it in real world settings.
Right.
But we can only do it in real world settings after it's approved as a medicine. Everything else is research. So it's almost by definition, it can never be, quote, an evidence-based therapy, even though we've been studying it in highly rigidly controlled research for 25 years.
Right.
So it is evidence-based. It is better results in other things, lower dropout rates. And I think it's customized both for PTSD, but also for other indications, but it's specifically for a variety of different therapists. I mean, a different psychedelic therapies. So our approach can be used with ketamine. It can be used with ibogaine, can be used with MDMA, psilocybin. And it's not so much our approach. It was developed during the 50s and 60s.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can see unconditional positive regard in there. I mean, you can see the beginnings of holotropic breathwork and kind of that just non-ordinary state work. I mean, you can see elements, like, I know this has been kind of an also interest area of you, and, kind of, you can see kind of the religious experience, the spiritual experience emerge.
Yeah, although that's I'm glad you mentioned that, Sandy, because there's a general understanding, which is true, that with the work with LSD and psilocybin in the 50s and 60s, and the work with the classic psychedelics over the last 25 years, that there's a correlation between the depth of the mystical experience as measured by the mystical experience questionnaire and therapeutic outcomes. The deeper you let go, the deeper you can move beyond your sense of self, the deeper you merge into this sort of underlying sense of interconnectedness. Where you'll get over addiction or depression or trauma or any number of different things. However, when it comes to MDMA, we've used the same mystical experience questionnaire, and there is no correlation.
Oh, interesting.
The fundamental difference between the work with MDMA and the work with classic psychedelics is that we do not see this correlation. So that also means that our therapeutic method to support whatever emerges makes the most sense, because we don't see that we want to move this towards a spiritual experience or any kind of things like that. It's just wherever anybody wants to go. There are benefits from having the sense of interconnectedness.
Yeah.
For me,
well, and that's so interesting because, like, for people who are, maybe less familiar with methodology, right? Like, that's how a model gets developed or a theory gets developed. You look at something that's correlated, with outcome, and then you see if you insert it into the model, if it changes the outcome. So what I'm hearing you say is there's no correlation. So therefore, if it emerges, we'll be with it, but we're not going to move it in that direction nor make any assumptions. I mean, is that accurate?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it fits within, we support whatever's emerging. And we have a preference. I mean, when you work with LSD or psilocybin, there is this inherent kind of dissolution of the sense of self and resistance or fear or openness to it. And so the more that you open to this flow, the better able you are to heal.
Yeah.
but that's not the case with MDMA. So it's fundamentally different. And some of the criticisms has been, oh, you've got a mystical experience that doesn't make sense that people have to have, or your inner healing intelligence is this non-scientific phrase concept. And it's more like I would say this inner healing intelligence is more like the serotonin theory of depression. It's a mechanism of action, but it's not something you have to believe in. It's not anything that it's just the therapist support what's emerging. It's sort of the whole point of it, in a way, is to develop a sense of safety and trust for difficult things that are emerging.
Yeah.
That there's an order to it, that there's a wisdom to the psyche bringing this to your attention. And, what we say is that difficult is not the same as bad. And the difference is resistance. If it's something difficult, you can work through it. It can be the most valuable therapeutically. But it turns bad is when you resist it and you're just, holding it off.
Well, and it's interesting because we actually, my business partner, Signe, she did a kind of a briefer interview with Michael as a follow-up just about exactly this inner healing intelligence and what it does and does not mean. Because, what Michael says and what I witness is it doesn't mean you don't do anything. Right. What it does mean is that you use multiple types of interventions that have a reason and a theory and a training and an understanding behind them to work in whatever way the client is showing up, keeping in mind it's an 8-hour session, and you're helping remove and work through these defensive blocks so that the inner healing intelligence can emerge. It's not like you just sit there and hang with it, right?
Yeah. And Sandy, I think something else that's really important is just this idea that it's 8 hours. That, when you think about therapy, most people think, oh, it's once a week, 1 hour, once a week.
Yeah.
But you get to the therapist's office, it takes you a few minutes to sort of settle in. Then you can start doing this deeper discussions. But then after not too long, you have to start really, wrapping it up and be ready to go out into the world and drive and do all these different things if you've drove or take public transportation or however you got there. And while you're there, because it's a limited time, you kind of want to get straight to the particular issue that's at the forefront of what's going on. When you have an 8-hour session, it's the luxury of time.
Totally.
And also, you don't have to go directly to the trauma. That's one of the reasons why I think this 8-hour session produces a lot lower dropouts.
Yeah.
There's no sense that you must get to this right away, even if you're not ready. That's your problem. You can get to happy experiences. You can go wherever you go. And it can alternate between happy and difficult, or positive to build strength.
Right.
And then with MDMA, there's the sort of, what I would say, if you had to boil down, what does MDMA do? My main word would be self-acceptance.
Oh, interesting.
Or self-compassion, or this sense of self-love, that you settle into the moment. That's the other part of it, is that you're not thinking so much about what you need to do next or what you did before, or you settle into this moment. You're open-hearted. You're able to have your fear response to traumas reduced by the chemical agent, by the way that the MDMA works.
Yeah.
And you can look in a more full way, or feel, experience in ways that when the trauma was happening, you kind of focused on survival or other things.
Totally. Yeah. I have an emerging theory. Can I ask you what your thoughts on?
Yeah.
So I have kind of a hypothesis that I'm working with that really kind of, again, like Bessel van der Kolk was another one of my most influential people, both in interactions and in teachings, and I've tracked it pretty closely. And, so the inability to feel safe with self-world or others, right? And then I've been kind of tracking Rick Hanson's work, Buddha's brain, and the neuroscience of resilience. And kind of based on that and a bunch of other things, what you just said, the emergence of self-compassion and the ability to feel ease, what I think would be interesting with psychedelics, and what is not enough voice put to, even though you just did it, but it could belong in the model, is the ability to notice, tolerate, and sit with well-being. That is actually as much of an outcome that we should look for, deepen into, and facilitate than processing of the difficult stuff, because that's, to me, is where the rubber meets the road. Do you actually feel better? And can you stay in the softness and ease and stay in a place where the hypervigilance is decreased enough to appreciate the fact that spring is really pretty out my window right now?
Yeah, that's all right. Now, I put a link to a paper in the chat, and maybe to make it available to it's Bessel van der Kolk's paper. And what he talks about is exactly what you're talking about, but he calls about effects of MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD on self-experience.
Uh-huh. Oh, what nice. I need to read that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's a really, really important study because
Great.
it looks at people that have had difficult attachment styles, from childhood wounds, childhood traumas. It looks at alexithymia, different ways of where people can no longer experience emotions. They're not sure what they're feeling. Self-compassion scale.
Yeah.
It's
I love
about
that.
those elements that he thinks are really the sort of transformative elements to help people get over PTSD. And a big part of it is this self-compassion that you can just accept yourself as you are, you relax into it, and you don't have to be constantly self-critical in these certain ways, the self-love, the sense of you're all whole and heal. And it's in part this oxytocin release that MDMA produces, certain kind of hormones. But the main thing is just you settle into yourself and you accept yourself as more of a complex being.
Right.
And what's even more astonishing to me a lot is that people develop compassion for the perpetrators. Not that it's forgiving or saying it didn't matter, but they can often see the perpetrators as people that are hurting themselves.
Right.
That's really important.
Right. Like I can see how my parents, I'm being stereotypical, but I see how my parents were not mine. I mean, well, yeah, whatever. Sorry, mom and dad. But I see how these people, it came from a multi-generational lineage of trauma, and they were, doing the best they could in any given moment, but they were impacted by theirs as well. So therefore, right, we're all just in this world doing the best that we can.
Yeah, now that actually raises just another point that I want to mention, which is this idea of working with adolescents and younger kids traumatized.
Yeah.
So, the idea there for me is this, we want to help people closer to the trauma. And a big part of the rhetoric of the drug war, which people listening may have heard of, is, oh, kids' brains are still developing. They're developing into about 26, and therefore we have to protect their brains from any kind of outside influence while they're still developing. And that's why they should never smoke marijuana and all this kind of thing. However, of course, we think nothing of that when it comes to ADHD drugs.
Sure, here, have some Ritalin, have some Adderall, it'll be fine.
Yeah, but this idea, though, that if you've been traumatized when you're young, your brain is developing in a warped manner.
Right.
What we see is you have hyperactive amygdala. You respond to fear more rapidly. You have reduction of activity in the prefrontal cortex. These are neuroscience observations from people with PTSD. You have lower activity in the amygdala, which reduces fears, but lower connectivity with the hippocampus, where memories are put into long-term storage. So the memories never fully get processed.
Yeah.
And it does the opposite of that. It increases activity in the amygdala and the connection. I mean, increases activity in the hippocampus and the connection with the amygdala, increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, decreases activity in the amygdala. So that this idea that young people who are traumatized, they should be treated as soon as possible. And one of the things that makes me think it will work is this octopus study that was done by.
Tell me.
You know of the study? Or?
No, I know nothing about the octopus study.
Oh, this is fantastic. Okay, so Doblin is the researcher. She was at Hopkins now.
Oh, I know about the mice. I just don't know about the octopus. I've been following her work. She's amazing.
Yeah, so we supplied the MDMA for this octopus study. So people have seen octopus teach, my octopus teacher. They're very smart animals, but they're also very solitary. And they will kill other octopuses. They don't want to be with other octopuses until the end of their life when it's mating season.
Right.
So 600 million years ago, more or less, humans and octopuses
More or less.
went different directions, the cursors, but octopuses still process serotonin.
Oh, interesting.
So Gould was wondering what happens if you give MDMA to an octopus. So there's this experimental device. You put them in the middle. It's a box, and it's got two doors out. One goes to another octopus in a bird cage that can't move. The other goes to like a ball, an inanimate object in another bird cage. And no matter how you switch up the sexes, the octopus spends more time with the inanimate object. And when it's with the other octopus, it's just around the perimeter and doesn't really engage. However, you put the MDMA in the water, you soak the octopus in the water. It took them a while to figure out the right dose.
Yeah.
Then you got octopus high on MDMA, and you put them back in this contraption, and now they spend more time with the other octopus.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So it's pre-verbal, evolutionary conserved. There's a fundamental pharmacological effect, independent of the therapy, that will work in children. But children also, when you give them the support and this sort of the traumas that come to the surface, I think it's going to be really the sort of psychiatry, psychotherapy of the future is going to be to try to treat people closer to the trauma. And we have another situation somewhat like that, where there's a lot of work with veterans in the Veterans Administration with MDMA therapy.
I think the VA is going to end up leading the charge. Go VA.
It's
do it.
A lot. Yeah. But Congress just gave $10 million to the Department of Defense, and they've put out grants to do MDMA therapy with active duty soldiers.
Yeah.
And so again, this idea of closure.
That's amazing, isn't it? People don't believe me when I tell them that.
Yeah. Well, it's really, really true.
Right.
And it's really good. And I think this possibility, if we really can fully integrate psychedelics, I think the benefits are going to be enormous, particularly for younger people who are traumatized, so that you don't have to live in this kind of fearful, extra fearful, distorted way.
Yeah.
And just keep getting worse.
Well, I think people don't realize, if you don't do trauma work from this perspective or understand it, that really the essence of PTSD or developmental trauma or complex PTSD is not feeling safe in relationship with self, world, or others. So you will see information that confirms your fears that you're going to be hurt, rejected, kicked out of the tribe, kicked out of the family. And, and then you begin to act as such. And then we create that which we're the most fearful of. Right. So the fear leads to distorted perception, which leads to distorted behavioral patterns, which then confirm belief.
And what you just said, too, about being kicked out of the tribe, there was Adam Kinzinger was a Republican on the House committee looking at the insurrection. And what he said is that, and this really stuck with me, he said that he's realized that there's something people fear more than death. Is being kicked out of your tribe.
Totally right, because humans can't survive alone, so it ties into the survival mode, and isolation is the worst punishment of all. Right.
That's where people can end up believing the big lie and things like that, because they don't want to leave the tribe, even though it doesn't make logical sense.
Well, and that's where we get back to the psychotherapy model. Because what I feel like I witnessed kind of in the training and watching the videos, and I know it's not the same, but there are similarities. Like I do series of ketamine sessions, like 2 in a week. So I do 3 in 6 weeks and then titrate, and it's all a trauma model. And I'm not here to sell that, but I'm really doing very similar things as the MAPS training. And what I know, so what I witnessed in good, effective trauma treatment is how quickly can we get, how can we escalate and amplify the ability to feel connected and feel safe in that connection? And so people who are like, oh, this isn't an evidence-based clinical model. I'm like, I know, but this is what we're doing. And this data supports it. And it just might not be clear to you, but if you know what you're seeing, sorry, I could go on about that, but
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's going to be, a real change over the next 5-10 years. I think MDMA, psilocybin, 5-MeO-DMT, other psychedelics are going to be approved, and therapists will then be cross-trained in the different modalities and then able to customize treatments for each individual patient. So that's the the vision for the future. And then that's also what we want to take around the world as much as possible.
I mean, it is so needed. And I love, just to loop back, just in case I don't want to lose that point about the adolescents, because I have heard that as well. People are like, gasp, give drugs to kids. And it's like, no, because I work daily with people who are traumatized as children and adolescents and trying to unravel the effect in the nervous system. And if we can get in there and do that before all the defenses build up around it, right, before they get more rigidly entrenched, then that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the visions that we'll explore in the future, moving more and more into group therapy, is when we work with refugees or migrants or people victims of war, that you have families that are all traumatized together.
Yeah.
So I think that we'll try to explore treating families together as well, parents and children, all at the same time, and they can create this safe family space together. Feel together, I think, more likely.
How does somebody like me, who's cheering you on, cheering the field on, trying to contribute in the ways that I can, like, how can we help get to a world in which families can be treated, to a world in which we can effectively utilize these powerful tools? Like, what needs to happen in the short term?
Well, first off, there's this saying that politics is downstream of culture.
Yeah.
Also, science is downstream of culture. The culture was scared of psychedelics during the 60s, and then we had decades and decades of complete suppression of psychedelic research.
Yeah.
So I think what people can do is to speak out and tell your stories. So, look at gay rights and gay marriage. What really helped that was people coming out. So we need psychedelic coming out. We need more and more people telling their psychedelic stories, particularly to people that might be scared of it or that might, might not be sympathetic. So I think that everybody can do that. It doesn't cost any money. It's like a reputational risk.
Yeah.
But it's what will really do it. So one of the, the medical marijuana, like the move from medical marijuana to marijuana legalization in many different states, the polling done by the advocates for marijuana legalization showed that one of the most important factors as to whether somebody was in favor of the legalization of marijuana is if they knew a medical marijuana patient.
Oh, interesting. Right. I mean, that makes sense because, that's what people, racial attitudes change. If you have exposure, just makes sense. Attitudes change with exposure.
Yeah. And also, you don't really know what to trust with the media, but if you know somebody and they tell you something that seems consistent with what you've seen in their lives, you believe it.
Right.
So I think so. One thing is people can come out, and we need that even more than ever before. The other is come to psychedelic science and really learn about what's going on. The other, of course, is to donate to MAPS or to other nonprofits because we're trying to do this in a way that's more open science, public benefit. So the pharma company, I wish were all funded by donations, but I wasn't able to do that.
Right. I mean, it was a valiant effort. You got really far. Thanks to those early donors, we're sitting here.
We raised over right now, and just April 8th actually was MAP's 39 anniversary.
Amazing.
So we raised about $150 million in donations, which is a lot.
It is so amazing that you have devoted your entire life to this. And again, I'm really grateful. So one last question. What does your heart, what does your authentic self want to share in this moment, just in this interview, but also just at this moment in time? What do you want people to know about you, about this effort, about the world?
Well, I think that psychedelics have been around for thousands of years. They're interwoven into the human evolution. It's not that, what I would say is that the suppression of psychedelics, the fear of psychedelics, is not about their inherent dangers. It's more about politics and power.
Yeah.
So when we think about what we're trying to do with the psychedelic renaissance, and in Western culture, really, the last time that psychedelics were fully integrated was around 396. That was the Eleusinian mysteries, that the cradle of democracy, the Greeks. There was the longest running mystery ceremony we know of in the history of the world, 2,000 years, wiped out by the Catholic Church. because they want to be the intermediary between you and spirituality.
Interesting.
So I want people to know that the psychedelics are and have been incredible survivors in the face of massive repression.
Sure.
What we're trying to do is not just bring psychedelics back like they were 50 years ago in the 60s or anything like that, or 60 years ago now. That really it's this transformation of consciousness that has been suppressed for millennium and a half or more. And I think that, I guess, the last thing to say is that, sorry, I have to, the last thing I'll say is that dreams are psychedelic. Hyperventilation is psychedelic. It's not just linked to drugs.
Right. Singing can
All
be
sorts of
psychedelic.
things
Dance can be psychedelic.
meaning mind manifesting. It's more
Right.
normal
Non-ordinary.
than else.
Yeah. Great. Well, I appreciate you, and I really appreciate your time, and I really enjoyed this, and I hope that you did as well. And anything you want to, kind of plug again, psychedelic science coming up, everybody should be there. Anything else you want to
check out maps.org and you'll learn about all sorts of different projects.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rick. I really appreciate it.
Terrific, Sandy.
Thanks for listening to Living Medicine. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.